Hello everybody, delighted to be here. My name's Craig Duxbury. I'm the Global President of Stein IAS, a world-leading B2B marketing agency where our purpose is to help build the world's most demanded brands. Now, following the live announcement of the second most valuable B2B Brands report, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined here today with David Haigh, the Chairman and CEO of Brand Finance. She's a world-leading brand valuation consultancy. And David helps C-suites and boardrooms all over the world to make those really critical connections between brand strength and how that converts into brand value and also enterprise value. So I'm in great hands today with David, and also this is always a real pleasure for me to be with the Mastercard brand. I'm here with Greg Boosin, who is the EVP of Global B2B and also Product Marketing. Not only does Greg do everything to do with Mastercard's B2B marketing globally, but he is also a real inspiration to all you B2B marketers out there globally. We can all learn so much from him. So delighted to be with you both. David, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you. We had the privilege 12 months ago, which is crazy, when the inaugural B2B, Most Valuable B2B Brands report was released. We're here again, the second one's released now. Back then there was a massive figure. It was $1 trillion, which was a gap between being left on the table between B2C brands and B2B brands. Looking at the report without giving it away, there's another big number. I think it's $250 billion, which is a 10% growth amongst the top 100 biggest B2B brands globally. What other insight can you give us into those findings? Who are the movers, the shakers, the new entrants? What does it look like?
Well, let me start by saying that I've been doing brand valuations for 30 years. And back then, the belief was that brands are emotional things that really only appealed to consumers. And so back in the day, we used to do brand value rankings primarily of consumer brands. But over the 30 years, it's become clearer and clearer and clearer that B2B brands are not purely left-brain decisions. They are emotional, they require communities, they require advertising, and it's become increasingly obvious to us that they're extremely valuable things. It took the IAA and Stein IAS to point out to us that we really should try and quantify that. So last year was the first time we did it, and we were quite surprised to discover that amongst the top brands, pretty much there's equality in the total value of B2B brands and B2C brands. And the only thing is that a lot of B2B brands do not have enough money spent on them. They are not doing enough advertising. And as a result of that, their brand strength is generally lower than B2C brands. And that's where the gap arose. There's a gap of $1 trillion waiting to be picked up by B2B brands if they do the right thing. Now, what's happened in the last year, here in the States, you see a lot of traditional B2B categories, like insurance, banking, oil and gas, and so on. They've been largely static. The thing which has really grown is IT. So Microsoft has absolutely skyrocketed, Oracle, and particularly NVIDIA. Everything to do with AI and the growth of tech. Fairly obviously, I suppose, given the amount of growth that's obviously going on. But in the rest of the world, and particularly in Asia, it's much more basic industries. So we're actually finding that a lot of money is going into infrastructure, engineering, electricity, various different brands of that kind, and they are rapidly growing their brands in order to dominate the world.
And is that one of the reasons why you expanded from a top 100 to a top 150 this year, given those new emergences?
Well, we expanded due to popular demand. You know, like when we published 100, everyone said, well, am I in it? And we said, well, you were 103. So we went, all right, we'll extend it to 150 next year. It might be 250 next year.
So by popular demand. And Greg.
Congratulations.
Greg, congratulations to Mastercard. It's in the high stratosphere when it comes to the report. And for everybody out there, you need to go and download it instantly, which you can do, thanks to B2Believe. But Greg, for those out there who aren't aware, you're very public in terms of your expansion growth,
Sure.
20 plus acquisitions that have taken place. And if you could just tell the B2B marketing audience out there what role the Mastercard brand strength plays within the overall business growth and the actual business performance?
Yeah,
That'd be
sure.
cool.
Look, a brand is a powerful thing. Ours is one that we're thankful for and nurture every day. Most people know Mastercard as a card payments brand. I mean, back in the day, you had a card in your hand, it had a little logo on it, you matched it with the logo at the till, and maybe they used the click-clack, the knuckle buster machine, but that completed the circuit. It's a very functional use of a brand for the consumer, right? What came off of that was a lot of trust, a lot of ubiquity, a lot of familiarity. And MasterCard, as we've expanded our business strategy, not only to expand in payments, but to grow in services and to build new networks, are leveraging the brand both to help the acquisitions and the acquisitions to help the brands. And I'll be a little bit more specific. The first thing is that MasterCard brings massive trust to any company that we acquire or the capabilities that we build or acquire. On the flip side, these new acquisitions expand our capabilities. So we're into MasterCard loyalty solutions, MasterCard identity solutions, MasterCard open banking solutions. And I'll give an example. We bought a couple companies in the open banking space. And at a point in time, when a credit reporting agency might ask you to augment your data as a consumer to grow your credit score, well, that's open banking capabilities, if you're not familiar. Well, you've got to click a button that say, I'm okay with you going out and getting more data. The lift is like 70, 80% when it's MasterCard branded versus when it's acquired company branded. And so at the same time, MasterCard grows our repertoire of what we're known for as a brand, and it makes it more tangible for people. So really, it's a symbiotic relationship.
And you mentioned a word there of like trust and obviously the quality of your services. Now, David, I'm going to bring you in here as well, because when people read the report, you talk about trust. When you have trust and quality, from a B2B perspective, how you then have to leverage that up through the full supply chain into B2C to truly get the full brand valuation from it. Mastercard has to be surely a pinnacle example of that. In terms
well,
of
traditionally B2B brands are closed and they stay in the B2B space. But as you invest in them and as they become stronger and stronger, they become something that consumers recognize as well. So things like Intel, Intel Inside, Gore-Tex, and various other ingredient brands. And Mastercard, in a sense, is an ingredient brand. It gives people confidence in a payment platform. I think the really good B2B brands are increasingly realizing that they can strengthen their position and make more money if they become ingredient brands. You can't be got rid of if your brand is known to the consumers.
If I could add to that.
Please do, yeah.
If it doesn't scale, it doesn't matter. So we take the ingredient brand with pride and the moniker of trust, which is amazing. It's, as we hear over and over again, business person is also a consumer is often a business person. And if your buyers are not in the market 95% of the time and only 5% of marketers in the time, which is something LinkedIn taught us through the B2B Institute, well, that has huge implications for brand building. That means you need to drive familiarity among your target audience, regardless of whether they're in the market or not. And having that consumer brand as a hook is really to an advantage.
So that provides a great segue, because at B2Believe there's been a lot of conversation about then the importance of creativity. We can have the science of the brand strength and the brand valuations and the math that goes with it. But at Mastercard you've got something which is, I think, enviable within not just the B2C world, but the B2B world as well, in terms of priceless. As a strategic, as a brand asset. What role and how do you leverage that, and how have you kept that kind of going to your advantage, and what impacts that had on your brand?
I appreciate you recognizing it. Priceless is something we're proud of, humbled by, and do our best to live up to the hype, I guess, on a daily basis. The first thing is you got to resist the temptation to move on to something else, right? This is the third CMO that's had Priceless, and each have brought it to new heights. If every decision is an emotional decision, then having Priceless as a brand asset is really remarkable. The trick, to your point about creativity, is how do you take the creativity of Priceless and bring it into a B2B world to really matter? And in that regard, it's about humanity. And I'll give an example. MasterCard works with non-government organizations to provide relief during disasters to people in disaster zones. We can get aid to those disaster areas before the boots hit the ground. And so the line we use is when a mother's phone line becomes a lifeline, that's priceless. And so I'm taking the B2B capability and trying to have a really human outcome to it.
And it just goes to show when you have a platform like that, there are endless opportunities for you to creatively explore it. I find another fascination how you use the multisensory angles to that. I don't think enough B2B brands explore the senses, the human senses within those campaigns. How again are you using those within a B2B space?
I appreciate you bringing that up as well. So look, one of the examples I'll give is sonic branding, which we launched a few years ago. And sonic branding is something that's quite important. Why is it important? It doesn't feel like it's important until you recognize that part of the trust of the Mastercard brand back into the normal card payment arena is that the brand be present on the card, on the terminal, et.cetera. And in an increasing digital world, it becomes harder and harder to be visible with your eyes. And so the Sonic offers that reassurance to the consumer that the transaction is complete and secure. And often I hear from people behind the counter that they can be packaging stuff up and just listen for the Sonic to know that it's complete. So it gives sort of the no hands, look ma, no hands.
Absolutely. I must highly recommend to everybody out there, if you're looking for some creative inspiration, the campaign's alive, you can go and see it, go and explore Mastercard in all its creativity. And David, just again for the audience, just give me your top 3 tips that you would give to not just the CMOs and the marketing community, but this is the finance community, it's at board level. So from the outcomes of the report, what are your top 3?
Well, I would say the top 3 tips for building B2B brands. First one is the recognition that they are about emotion, trust, reassurance. They're not just about left brain thinking. Secondly, you've got to invest a lot more. Over and over and over again, we go in and do brand valuations, and the perennial thing we say is you're just not advertising enough, you're not spending enough on all aspects of marketing, from sponsorship through to social media. So spend more and be more emotional.
Spend more people, did you hear that?
And be consistent. And that's one of the wonderful things about platforms like Priceless. I mean, Priceless was a stroke of advertising genius, in my opinion. I don't know how long it's been there, 20, 30 years?
Since 1997.
And it can go on for another 20 or 30 years because it's so clever. It encapsulates everything. Payment platforms are inherently boring. That has created a kind of emotional hook around which you can put all your campaigns. It's brilliant.
Greg,
Not sure I can
budgets,
agree with the boring part, but I understand the point.
Greg, on the budgets, your CFO and your CEO and your CMO and your C-suite, they are so connected.
They are.
In the whole planning process, the strategic cycles you go through. How have you achieved that? I know it's a challenge for global brands out there. What advice can you give?
Yeah, look, in fact, Sachin and Raja have been on stage together.
Yeah, they were at Cannes doing it. Yeah,
which is remarkable. That one had me quaking in my boots. So look, it's just about partnership, right? And it's about empathy for each other and what each other are trying to prove. Part of marketing is art and quite hard to drive an ROI on, right? But at the same time, the CFO needs to recognize that there is emotion behind this. And so, look, if I'm talking to the marketers out there, I would say, you've got to make sure the CFO feels that emotion of your campaigns on one hand.
And also involved early in the process.
You've got to strive to quantify, we say outcomes, not output. You got to quantify your output as much as possible. I'm sorry, your outcomes as much as possible.
Yeah, okay. And culturally, that's a huge... That doesn't happen overnight.
I guess. I've been at Mastercard so long, I don't know what the culture is outside of it, but it's a terrific culture.
Again, I just think so many people can learn from.
Yeah.
And David, you do a lot of those with clients in terms of helping them with budget planning and the rest. What are the challenges you see from within that B2B organization?
The biggest challenge that we've had over the 30 years we've been here is that finance directors are not engaged enough in understanding how expenditure on brands really builds something for the long run. they have it's a cliche, but it's true. They tend to believe that if it doesn't produce a return within 12 to 18 months, it's got to be a waste of money. And the thing which our study shows and this event shows is that they are long-term assets that do create returns. So you just got to overcome what the finance director thinks to put the money behind them.
And there's no doubt that those top 10, top 20 are all performing in that way.
I mean, they're all multi-billion brands. And there are so many multi-billion dollar B2B brands, and they could easily double in value over the next 10 years.
Did any brands surprise you in the league table this year round? Or that you hadn't heard of before? Were there any newcomers where you were?
The rate of growth of NVIDIA did surprise me. I mean, you hear a lot about AI, but that is really what's driving it, because they're creating the chips that are making AI possible, and they have absolutely stormed away with it. And Microsoft as well. I mean, Microsoft has grown dramatically in the last 12 months, and it's growing on the same platform. But its marketing is very clever, and here we are. Part of the process.
And you've been doing the Global 500 for how many years now?
We've been doing it for 18 years.
So you've been doing that for 18 years, and there's about a 50-50 split now, is that right, would you say, in those league tables,
that's about
B2B,
right.
B2C?
We're covering the whole world. We get brands from all over the world, and we get the data from stock markets all around the world. We have a database of about 5,000 or 6,000 brands that we value every year. The top 500 are the pinnacle, they're the top ones. And the insight that you guys have helped us to see is that a very large proportion of that top 500 is B2B, and it's growing. It's growing possibly faster than the B2C.
That brings a nice warm fuzz to my heart. I might be biased being a B2B man through and through.
We're finally having our moment.
We are, aren't we? Yeah, I'd like to see that go from 50 to 60 to 70. After all, I do believe B2B makes the world go around, so.
I think there's one thing that I'd like to finish with, which is that when you look at a sector, it's like an ecosystem, and you have a lot of different brands that interact with each other. Government brands, certification brands, B2B brands, supplier brands, and then you have the brands that are very obvious externally, and they're the B2C brands. Sometimes people think the B2C brands are over here and the B2B brands are here, but to me it's one ecosystem. And that's why it's very, very important that the B2B brands raise their heads. And frequently, if they raise their heads, they'll be more recognized outside, and it makes it easier for them to become ingredient brands and secure their position. And in the end, it gives them much greater security, lower risk. The Intel example I gave you was them securing their position and avoiding anyone trading them out. And so it's a very interesting thing, this ecosystem, how it works, and how brands can exploit that to make more money and get greater security for themselves. And I recommend every B2B marketer to look carefully at their ecosystem and see how they fit within it.
I would urge
anything to build on that?
Maybe a couple points.
Yeah.
The first is we believe in a single brand, right? We don't have a consumer brand and a B2B brand, but I understand why we're having that conversation. There's one Mastercard brand. I would suggest that the bridge between them is creativity. How can I tell the story that stitches together the priceless platform, as you put it, right, together with what I need to do to help drive the business. Marketing strategy follows business strategy, and I've got priceless in my pocket, and I got a set of capabilities in my pocket. How do I bring them together creatively with humanity at bear? And we do a lot of that with sponsorships, to the point about spending more money, right? We would love to drive people's passions more and more and more.
There's a lot of also debate around, from a budget, from a spend perspective, do you put it into brand, into demand, what's the balance, where does it sit? I'm not going to ask you what your budgets are.
No, please do. You can't ask me the budget.
Splits.
Yeah.
Can you give any?
So look, here's what I'll say. Every marketer has two jobs: drive perceptions and drive behaviors.
Yeah.
And inherently behind that statement is I've got to drive the belief about the brand and the capabilities of the company, and in a B2B language, I have to drive leads, right? But I can't do one without the other, right? The former, driving perceptions, harder to quantify, right? Might take longer than 18 months to do, but being at Priceless for almost 30 years, 25 years, brings you to the point of, yeah, it actually makes sense to invest in an asset like that.
I think one of the cliches is that there are some sectors that inherently require lower marketing budgets than others. And historically, something like professional or commercial services used to believe it's all about the people, it's not about the brands, keep the budgets low. And a lot of the people in those sectors kept the budgets very low. But then suddenly you get a Deloitte or an Accenture who break the mold and spend a lot of money and really build brands, and look at where they are. They're both right at the top of their categories, and they're in virtually unassailable positions, or they're very strong positions. A lot of that comes down to breaking the mold and actually spending more than a category the cliche suggests you should do.
I'm with you. And do you see, again, within that same B2B ecosystem, the measurement of the brand strength, especially in economic challenging times with the headwinds which we've got and the rest, perhaps isn't done consistently enough? The measurement, what's your brand strength measurement within? How do you do it?
There's the opportunity to do perception studies for sure, right? But I think the real opportunity is to take advantage of the MarTech that's out there, and the artificial intelligence, to the NVIDIA and Microsoft examples and LinkedIn, to help quantify those outcomes, right? And look, there are some great technologies that are coming around the corner, or that we've seen launch recently, in particular from LinkedIn, that I think are really exciting and only make a brighter future for us to have that conversation with the CFO and take maybe triangulate the rankings together with my quarterly review opportunities.
Understood.
I think one of the interesting things is that historically, the cost and complexity of getting good research to understand how your brand was doing in B2B was very, very high.
Really
so
good
therefore,
point.
a lot of people ignored doing research,
Really good point.
which hamstrings you. Nowadays, because of technology, the costs are coming down. And I think people are recognizing that quantitative research is good, qualitative research is almost as good in the B2B space, but you need to do it regularly to understand where your brand is going.
Understood. I could sit here all day chatting about this. Fortunately, we've run out of time. So on behalf of myself, but also B2Believe as well, I'd like to thank both David and Greg. Don't forget, go and download the report. If you didn't see the first one, go and download that one as well. It's been a real pleasure.